So Scrum. So what happens in Scrum is, so Scrum is a framework, as I said, for the project management that emphasize on the teamwork, accountability, and iterative progressiveness. So teamwork, when I said, like, it includes your business analyst, product owner, your software engineer, developer, tester, and everyone. So it needs to be a collaborative work. Everyone should know what is happening. You should not be doing a silo development, because what happen is that then you will keep working as per your understanding, right? So you should always be discussing, you should always be doing reviews of your product. You should always be doing demos of your product, so that you understand what you are building, and other also can understand what is coming out from different team or from different team member. And here as well, if you can see this diagram, it shows like what we do in the Scrum or sprint is that we plan, then we do it, we measure it, and then we adapt it. Which means plan is like you do sprint planning meetings. Do is when you do your normal stand-ups, when you implement your stories, daily work, that is the do part. Measure is when you do your sprint reviews, when you show your burn down charts, that how much work you have done through some Jira toolings and all. So that is the major part with some reportings. Then the adapt thing. So we, as it is a continuous learning kind of project management skill. So what we do here is to adapt as well. That whatever retrospective we do in the Scrum, we should adapt from that as well. So if we are finding out some improvement areas, we should start working on it. If we find some of the good or good areas as well in this retrospective, so we should continue working on that as well. So these are the four important cycles or stages in a Scrum, I would say. Yep. So these are some of the key activities or key things which happen in a Scrum. So Scrum definitely has like sprints. Generally, it is said to have a 2 weeks sprint, so that you can plan something for a 2 week time, and it is not very longer or a shorter, because to implement something generally it takes 2 3 days of time, or maybe up to 5 days of time. So it is always suggested to have a 2 week sprint. We should always start our sprint on Wednesday. Although we can start it on any day, but there is a psychological reason why we should start our sprint on Wednesday, is because Mondays are always Monday blues, right? So Wednesday is one of the day in the whole week where people are more focused in the work, because when you come from a weekend, Mondays generally people are not that much active. So if you start a sprint on Wednesday, everyone will be more attentive, everyone will be more focused, and that's why the midday in the week is supposed to be a good day for starting a sprint. Then the stand-ups, where we keep updating our team members, where we provide some updates if there are some blockers, if there are some challenges, or if there are some timelines we want to discuss, we can quickly discuss. Ideally, we should keep the stand-ups maximum 15 minutes, or not if needed, like up to 30 minutes, but definitely not more than 30 minutes. 15 minutes is the ideal time for stand-ups. Sprint planning, we should do sprint planning for the future sprints. Ideally, we should do one sprint planning session each week, where we can define what we are going to work in the upcoming sprint, which means that we are getting ready for the future work, and the team is not sitting idle for the future work. So if there is some requirement which is not clear, we should keep that refined through our sprint planning meetings and our backlog refinement meetings. So what actually we do in our backlog refinement is that whatever stories or whatever requirement is defined for future sprint, we should ask, and we should refine question. We should ask questions around it. We should refine that requirement. For example, if someone asked you to develop a mobile app with a login page, so if you are having a login button on it, and if you are passing a username and password in the login field, so your story will have some requirements, like how many, like length, what should be the length of your username, what should be how your password should behave, should it have any asterisks or special characters or not. So those kind of things will be your requirements. So these things you should get refined or clarified in the backlog refinement sessions or sprint refinement sessions, so that whatever you are building it correct, and there is no rework happening in your work. So you should always do once a week, or if possible twice a week, refinement sessions. And in those refinement sessions, all the stakeholders, your business analyst, product owner, developer, QA, if you have any, they should all be part of it, so that they all are having same understanding and they are all on the same page, and they can provide their suggestions as well. Then sprint reviews. Ideally, you should do your sprint reviews on your last day of the sprint, which means if you are starting your sprint on Wednesday, then you should do your sprint reviews on the Tuesday, the second week, right? So that whatever work you have done, you can show it. And if there is something, some improvement which is needed, your technical leads and all, they can probably provide you some suggestions for future stories. Then Scrum retrospective. So Scrum retrospective is should also be done on the last day of the sprint, where you retrospect that what went well, what went wrong, and what should be the next steps. So these are the links which I have shown here. You can use these tools. These are free tools which you can use for your sprint planning and sprint retrospective or Scrum retrospective. Then Scrum of Scrum, this is also a concept where if you have like multiple Scrum teams, then you can do like a superset of Scrum where your like Scrum Master or your project manager or your lead can go and they can decide what actually they are doing and they can share information. So not sure how much it will be useful right for you right now, but in future you can also adopt Scrum of Scrum. So these are some good tools like Scrum Poker. So your always your story should be defined with a story point, and generally I believe you would have heard that your story point should be in the Fibonacci series, like 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, like this, right? So that helps you to to do a estimation of your work as well, and that helps you to identify that how much work your team can do, how much work the individual can do, and what should be the target for a sprint. So it is always good to have different stories in a sprint, but you should have a sprint target as well. That whatever work you are doing in a sprint should make some sense as a product. So if you are building a mobile app, if you are also building a robotic component, and if you are building something related to some software, so your overall sprint should also have a goal. So a story has a goal, but a sprint should also have a goal, which is a superset of all small stories, right? So that's how probably you should start your Scrum and sprint thing. Then the Kanban, probably you would have heard about Kanban as well. So Kanban is also a bit similar to Sprint, but here what happens is you generally have a open board where there are multiple tickets. Your product owner or your business analyst keep adding the tickets there, and your team, everyone start keep picking the tickets based on their availability and all. There are benefits in both Scrum and Kanban, but I would suggest we should use Scrum because in Scrum we have more structured way of working, where everyone is aware of what they are working on. In Kanban, you are also aware in Kanban. You also get a chance to get aware in Kanban as well. But here, what happen is like you are picking a story or a task based on your availability and some of the priority as well. Ideally, it is suggested that we should use Kanban in those projects where we are doing some BAU or support kind of work, where we are picking some tickets and finishing it by end of the day. Then some agile tools. So Jira and Confluence, these are the two important tools. If you are following agile, if you are following Scrum, you should be good. At least you should know how these tools work, and these helps you to provide a structured way of working in the agile. Jira and Confluence both. So running Scrum with Jira basics. So how actually a Scrum in Jira works is like you create a Scrum project. Our team lead would have already created it for you. That you create a Scrum project, then you create stories or tasks in the backlog, then you create a sprint, generally a 2 weeks or 4 week sprint. Then hold the sprint planning meetings where you plan what you want to do in the upcoming sprints. Then you start the Jira sprint, then do a stand-up sessions for every morning for 15 minutes. Then the seventh step is like you can see your burn down charts on daily basis, how much your team is working. Then you can see the reports, hold the sprint review meeting on the last day of your sprint, hold the retrospective on the last day of the sprint, then complete the sprint in Jira on the last day of the sprint as well. And this step 12 is like start again from step 2 for every sprint. Then the some of the advanced items, like once you do follow the first 12 steps, then you should also start creating epics. So epics are superset of your stories. Epics help you to define a bigger project, right? Or define a bigger feature. As epic, the name itself suggests, epic is something, you know, big. So your stories are small components. Ideally all the stories should be independent of each other. You should not be dependent of other people while working on a story. You should try at least to keep your story independent. If you think that your story is dependent on someone else, you should create two different stories for it, so that people are not doing sequential work. They are working individually, and you can track things as well. However, the epic is, as I said, a superset. So both of your stories can be part of that epic. So once you are done with that particular story, those two stories, your epic can be closed. What epics provide is that it gives you a feature, it gives you a flavor of that, what overall functionality at a bigger level you have developed. So if you are working on a mobile app for one of your robot, so that mobile app could be named as that mobile name app can be treated as an epic, and that epic can have multiple stories. The stories could be to create a login page. The second story could be to add validation checks on the login page. The third story could be to add a payment device link on your app. The fourth could be like to add some support kind of, or a chat functionality in it. So such way you can create different stories. If you feel a chat functionality itself is a big thing to do, then you can create chat itself as an epic, and then you can create subtask, or you can create sub stories in it, where you can create different stories in that particular epic, right? So this way you
Just
can
a just a question, Himanshu. Where does the epic and story, in terms of timeline, is there a recommended timeline that you consider for an epic? So is it 2 weeks, a month, or should it be fixed in a single scrum?
Yeah, so ideally
So,
epics be linked with release, and it is suggested to keep epic for a month. So 2 weeks of sprint generally can have an epic,
okay.
and then your story should be definitely part of a specific sprint. So you can have multiple stories in a sprint. So how epic creation can help you is it can help you with a monthly target. So what you can do is I will show it in the next slide as well, in a live example actually. That what you can do is you can epic based on your monthly targets or your quarterly targets. That in this quarter, I need to deliver 5 functionalities, 5 big features. Those five big features can be linked to 5 different epics, and those 5 epics can have different stories. So with that, what you can do is you can create one epic for each month, and by the end of a quarter you should have like 3 epics ready. So with this approach, what happen is that on a quarterly basis, if you are delivering something, if you want to deliver something in the market, that will also give you an option for that. Otherwise what happen is that if you are building different stories, and there is some story which has not been developed while 9 stories have been developed, and you started working on another new feature, so those 9 stories can't go to live until that 10th story is not done. And the only way of tracking that 10th story is with the epic. So if you have an epic, you can link that all those 10 stories were done or not. If those 10 stories are done, then you can take your application to market anytime. Yeah. Okay.
Makes
So
sense.
next is your Jira board. Probably everyone would have seen it in your team right now. So generally, it has a backlog, board, reports, and release. So these releases, Ajay, we can tag our epics as well. Then the next is Jira Workflow. So the basic Jira Workflow which comes with is open, in progress, under review, final, approval, and done. So done is actually a status when your everything is done, your sign offs and your product is gone to some higher environment, or if you want, you can take it to production or live. But this is a basic workflow. We can have more refined one as well, like this. So ideally, this is a advanced workflow where what we suggest is like we open a story, we create a new story with an open status, right? Then we the next status it comes with is in analysis, where you are doing some analysis your during your refinement sessions, when you are when everyone is defining the requirements, they are doing a grooming of the refinements, they are requirements. So at that time you can keep your story in the in analysis state. When in analysis is done, then you put it in the DOR, which means definition of ready. There are two things: definition of ready and definition of done. So when you think that all the questions, queries, and every prerequisite is ready, only then you should put your story in the DOR. And once story is in DOR, it means that you do not have any dependency with any team, with any team member, with any market or business analyst, and now be able to close that story after development. So you should, after DOR, your story can go into in development state. And once you are done with the in development, you can put it into the code review, and then you can put it into the in testing state. So you can switch it the testing before as well, and then afterwards you can also do the code review. But these are some of the important stages which helps you to identify the different stages of your story. You can also put a ready for test state, because if you have developed something, some feature, and you want your QA to pick up that story, and he's busy with some testing or something else, so you can put it in ready for testing, and then whenever he's ready, he can put it in the in testing state. And if it passes the quality checks and all, then they can put it into DoD. Now it can be taken to higher environment or live whenever it wants. Yeah. So then,
So I have one question.
yeah,
If I put a task in done, and suppose after a week or something, I want to I find out there's something wrong with it. So should I make a one more task in Jira, or should I just shift my done task to the in progress? So
yeah,
this is something that I faced.
yeah. So in that case, if you face that issue, you should raise defect around it. So
Okay.
there is another type called defect or bug.
Bug.
So you should raise a
Yeah.
bug, and you should link
Mhm.
that bug with your story. So what benefit that
Okay.
provide is, first of all, it gives you a clear picture that how many defects came into the story, so that
Okay.
if we are doing something wrong, we should stop it in the future. Right? So bugs are not to identify that how many defects are coming in a developer story. Bugs are to identify what process related problems we are having. So if you will reopen the story, what will happen is that you
Mm-hmm.
will be able to understand that how much time you actually spent in the story. So for such kind of problems, you should always raise a defect or bug.
Okay.
Okay, and the last part is the Confluence. So Confluence is also a assessment tool which helps you to keep all the documents and requirements at one place. So if you are having some like minutes of meetings, if you are having some like requirements or some sprint planning goals and everything, you can all keep that in the Confluence. So I will show that as well now to you. Yep. So before, thank you. Now I will show you some of the dummy project, some live Jira specific stuff. Okay. So, so this is the dummy backlog which I have created, and here what you can see is this is the roadmap. Okay. So here in this roadmap, I have created one epic, and this epic has two demo stories, right? So the epic is here. So it started in August. So it helps me to understand like when we started all these epic as well. So once I will close this epic, or there is a due date and start date as well in this epic we can put. Then I will be able to identify that how much time did my epic took to did my epic take to close it, right? Similarly, we can have different other subtask or stories in it. So story is one of the tasks. If we want to create other items, what we can do is we can like, this is the issue type, this is an epic, we can choose task, we can choose bug, we can choose technical spike. Okay, sometimes what happen is that we do something as a spike work or as a trial work, right? We generally, sometimes we do not know that how the actual implementation will work or how the actual implementation uh, things will be needed, right? So in those cases we generally do a 2 hours, 4 hours, or maximum a day of spike, where we try something, and on the basis of those trials then we actually go for the implementation, because we should follow the fail fast approach, right? So if we have some confusions that the approach or analysis which you have chosen, whether that will be a good one or not, then in that case we should go for a technical spike. But technical spikes should be kept smaller, so that you are not spending 3 days, 4 days of work in the technical spike only, and then you come again saying that okay, the spike failed. So that should not be the case. So technical spike should be 2 hours, 4 hours job maximum if needed. It can be up to a 1 day job, but not more than that. If more than that something, then we should either clarify those things with the technical people, leads, or the business analyst. If
Okay.
and here you can see the bug type as well. Here you can see the bug type as well. So if you have any like issue which you face, then you can always create a bug, and you can tag it or link it with the story which you got. There is a possibility that you might not have all these issue types in it. So if you want to add more issue type, probably what you can do is you can configure them from here. One second. So you can always configure your Jira from these places, like what all things you want to do. So let's say this is my first project, and here in the first project, I can create projects in Jira. And in this first project, so I can go into the project settings. This is my issue type. This is one of the issue type. I can add more issues here as well, like add issue types. So whatever new issue types I want, I can add those here. As well as if it is an issue type, I can edit them here. So as many issue types you want, you can create it. For example, one of my project issue type I can show. This is one of my where you see we have multiple issue types here. Epic is there, bug is there, OKR, task, controls, risk. So if you see some risk that something might fail in future, then you can create a risk issue type. You can create a dependency as well. If you have some dependency on some team or something, you can create that. You can create design issues. You can create assumptions, that we are doing an assumption that the functionality will look something like this. You can create technical stories. You can create spikes. You can create live defects. So if you have something, so bug is one of the issue. You can create a live defect as well, which means if there is something which has gone live to the customer, and you are facing some issue in the production, then you can create a different issue type so that you can distinguish that how many live defects you have. This helps you to understand the severity and priority of your defect fixing, because all your live defects should be fixed as soon as possible as an incident.
Yeah.
Then you have retrospectives. So whatever retrospective points you get, you can also add those in your Jira as a retrospective actions and steps, and you can track that as well. That whatever retrospective points came in, whether and if because all the retrospective points are always assigned to the team itself, because it is the team who is going to bring the improvements. It is not the project manager or it is not the technical lead who is going to improve things. So it is always a team who can bring the change. So some of the retrospective items can be assigned to the lead itself, and some of the retrospective items can be assigned to the team itself, so that we are continuously improving. Yep.
Okay.
Then we can add customer feedback also. If we have something like which we want to track it as a customer feedback, that something which was shared by the customer or the end user. So that's how we can keep multiple items in Jira. The next thing is that how we should be managing our stories and all. So this is one of my epic. So an epic, you can add multiple links or fields here. For example, label is one I have added here. So label is something, if you have some specific type of stories, you can always add that label here. So for example, I can add it as a like mobile app. So what will happen is it will create a label, and this can help me to filter my stories related to mobile app. So here, now it has a label as a mobile, and if in my filters, if I go, I should be able to then search my stories based on the that particular filter. So here is my current filter, which says like project is first project and issue type is story. So it is currently showing me 2 stories. And if I want to search that how many stories are there in my mobile epic or in my mobile specific functionality, then I can just write labels equal to mobile.
Okay.
Now it will search me, it will give me 10. Okay, so it gave me this particular uh, result as a mobile app. So it was not giving me before because it is an app. So if I go back to the query and I chose it here as a story, so if I change it to epic, let me switch it again. So I was passing it as a story and it was not giving me anything, but where the issue type where I put that label was the epic. So now if I change it, it will give me this particular epic. So this particular epic, if I will go inside, I will see that label here, which is mobile. Yeah. So these are some of the fields which you can use for your filtering, and for the reporting purpose, it always helps. And there is a saying like, if you can't measure, you can't improve, right? So it is always good to measure what you are working, so that you can continuously improve your stuff. And similarly, so these are some of the filters and reportings which helps you to measure your work and all, as well as you can also start you can also use these fields like start date, due date of your story. For example, this is a story. You can put a start date, because a sprint is generally 2 weeks, right? So you cannot keep working on a story for 2 weeks. So you should put a start date as a like and a user and a particular developer can't work on all the story at the one time, right? So if there is a developer one or developer A who works on 3 story in a sprint, so he should define that what story he will be working on in the first 3 days, then what will he pick in the next 2 days, and then what he will pick in the last 5 days. And on the basis of that, he should put a start date of a story and the due date, expected due date, which he thinks. And then we should also add fields like actual end date, that if there was a story which was defined as a due date, so this can be defined as a due date in the sprint planning meeting, that where when we are doing a planning, we should define what we are going to do in the next sprint, and we can also define when we are going to do it. So what and when part, and then this actual date can be put when we are actually closing the story, right? So what happen is that if we are giving a different date in this one, this will help us understand that something happened which made you not work on your story, and then in your retrospective you can identify what was the reason that you were shifted from your path. Because when you are changing your like preferences and all, sometimes what happen is it takes you more time to work on things. So you should always stick to the targets, whatever is there for your epic and story. So you can use this actual end date field as well. You can always add these fields using your configurations and all. So if I go here in the configure, you will always see these different fields. So I have given start date, due date, time tracking, actual end date. So if I and label as well. So priority of my ticket as well. So you can always drag and drop this thing, and you can always add a new label. You can always remove a label. For example, if I want to, just for an example, if I want to remove actual end date, and if I remove it, and if I save this one, now if I go back to FP3 story, I will not see this actual end date. Right? So start date is there, due date is there, but there is no actual end date coming here. But it is generally suggested that we should always have some start date and due date, which is the expected due date, and then the actual due date, so that you can track it, that how, like how your velocity or how your things changed during the sprint. And the last field which you can also use
Can you
is
share
your
the team velocity chart, Himanshu? Just as a example.
yeah. And the last thing you can use is your time tracking as well. So in time tracking, you can log your time. So probably you would be using it already. So whatever you think like time spent is, whatever you think the time remaining is, you can also pull that in this one. And then you can track how much time did it take. So that tracking is generally not to identify who is working less, who is working more, but that is generally to refine the processes. That if we are defining something, if a requirement is, so let's say if Ajay is saying the requirement should take 5 hours, but you as a developer think that it cannot be done in 5 hours. So these kind of tracking can help you to understand that how we can build that thing in 5 hours, right? Or if you are as a developer think that that cannot be built in a 5 hours, and it needs 8 hours, then probably the business analyst, product owner, or your CEO, CTO, they can also change their thinking that okay, the team is also saying right. So it is always both ways, right? So but that can only happen when you have the right tracking ways to do it. And then once you all follow this thing, so there is another thing is like the description and acceptance criteria. So you should have clear description and acceptance criteria in the story, so that whatever you are working, you have a proper information about it. When you have this detailed story, a clear story, then you can always work independently on your task. And then this last thing is the reporting part. So you can always go into your burn down chart velocity. So currently I have not set up this velocity report, so that's why it's not coming, but I can show something from my existing project. Uh, so this is how, so these are different uh, I would say charts which you can configure. So velocity is one of the charts. Sprint report is one of the chart. Burn down, burn up chart is there. So burn down chart is to identify whatever your backlog is, how much you are, burning it down, how much you are progressing is. Burn up chart is another chart which also helps you to identify how much total work you have in your plate. Then epic report is there, that how much epic you suggested for a particular quarter, how much you are delivering and what is pending. So if I show this one as a velocity chart, so this will look something like this. Okay. So this is one of the view of your velocity chart. So here what it shows is that these are the different sprint. So sprint 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So it shows that the gray one is like how much you committed. So the commitment and the completed ones. So for example, in this particular sprint, the 16th sprint of mine, we committed 80 story points and we delivered somewhat around 60 story points. So there were 20 story points which were spilled. So with this one, the benefit of doing all the tracking is that we can identify that the 20 got spilled. So what was the reason of those spill? There could be some technical reasons. There could be some environmental issues. There could be some dependencies which could be the reason of it. But this helps you to identify that there was some problem and how we can stop that problem in the future, right? So as you can see here that the last sprint, if you can see the 14, 15, 16, so you can see that the velocity is increasing here. So earlier we used to target for 100 velocity, right? But then we identified that the team cannot do 100 story points. So we were committing more, which was also not good, because when we are
Okay.
committing more and when we are not delivering it, there is no point of committing those, because when you commit something, you are doing sprint refinement for it. So, which means that you are doing refinement work, you are creating stories, which also takes effort, but you are not working on it, right? So, similar to that, like you are purchasing bricks and cement, but you are not building a flat, then there is no point of purchasing that. It will ruin with rain whenever rain comes, right? So, the better part is like whatever you are committing, you should target to finish that. And then it can be seen as a chart as well, like the Sensex kind of chart. So you can configure it anyways, whatever you want. Okay, so we are like almost 1 hour. It's been, sorry, it took a bit more time. We can take last 5 minutes as questions if you have. And I hope you would, this thing would have given you some flavor of how we should work, what all different practices we should follow in
Yes,
the.
yes, sure it did. So
So
I have one question. Like in our Jira projects, if we want to know how many epics and stories and every task of each story in a one flow chart, is it possible to see that?
yes, yes, we can. So the Epic report which I shown you can always configure that. So let
Okay.
me, yeah. So these, if you can see my screen right now, so there is a sprint report here, right?
Yeah.
And the Epic report as well here, right? So
Okay.
you can always configure these reports. So this is Epic burn down. This is release burn down. So what you can do is you can plan your release on quarterly basis. That every quarter you will release something to the market, right? So that
Okay.
should be, you should not wait. Neither you should be in a hurry to bring something to market. Neither you should be very late. You should target on a quarterly basis that in a quarter we should be delivering some feature to the market, so that people are also, the your consumer or user is also getting always good feeling that the app is getting some updates, right? Whenever
Right.
you
Right.
use any app or like Apple, for example, if you use And when you get a new update, you always have a curiosity. Okay, something new is coming. So similarly.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Yeah.